Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, June 30th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, today we have a great number of feasts, as we do every day. First, we'll start off with Our Lady of Calais in France. It goes back to 1347. We're told that the whole town of Calais in France was besieged by the English, who lost many troops during the siege. So obviously, it was the English were not happy. So what they did is they laid siege and for a whole year. So what happens? Well, they were starved. And so they wanted to surrender, but the English king, Edward III, he said he would not accept their surrender unless 6 citizens of Calais came before him bareheaded, barefooted, dressed in rough shirts, and each with a halter about his neck. He demanded the keys of Calais, and that these men would accept his pleasure, however severe, before the rest of the citizens would receive any mercy. Right? So he would just do whatever to them that he wanted, and they just had to be okay with that. So the entire population prayed to Our Lady of Calais at the shrine. Right? It had been damaged during the war, but it's interesting because the shrine had actually been built by the English while they possessed the city, because they had been masters of it for 210 years. Of course, nobody wanted to, give their life in such a manner, but finally a nobleman came forward and offered his head in ransom. Right? 5 others then volunteered, and they did everything as the king demanded. Right? And so when they stood before the king, he angrily reminded them of the losses they had suffered through their stubbornness. Right? Because they wouldn't surrender, and so he lost many men. So he then ordered the 6 citizens to be beheaded. Well, the king's bravest and noblest soldiers pleaded with him to spare these men who, came of their own accord, but in vain. But, what happened? Then Queen Philippa rose from her seat and, kneeling before the king, with tears streaming down her cheeks, pleaded, "My lord and husband, I have crossed the sea through many dangers to be with you. Let me now pray you to have pity on these 6 prisoners." After a few minutes of deep thought, the king declared, "Madame, I wish you had been somewhere else this day. I cannot deny what you ask me. Take these men and dispose of them as you will." So, of course, what did she do? The gracious queen gave the 6 hostages better clothing, a certain amount of money, and had them safely brought back through the lines and set at liberty to return home. Right? So the king, obviously humiliated at his queen's mercy, spared the town. And it's a nice thing there said, Queen Philippa was a figure of Our Lady, interceding for these men and obtaining mercy for them, just as the Blessed Virgin, Gate of Heaven, will do for us if we make her our advocate before God. Right? From that time on, Our Lady of Calais was evermore recognized as the merciful Mother of Calais. Right? So they added a beautiful shrine, a magnificent chapel to the shrine of Our Lady of Calais in the year 1631. Right? And then we jump over to Canada, where we celebrate Notre Dame de Bon Secours in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. It was in 1672 that Marguerite Bourgeois, a missionary to Canada and founder of the Congregation of de Notre Dame, went back to France, where her friend gave her one of the statuettes carved from the sacred oak of Montieu in Belgium. Right? Saint Marguerite brought that precious image back to Montreal and placed it in a reliquary in the stone chapel of Notre Dame de Bon Secours, Our Lady of Good Help, which was dedicated on June 30th, 1675, as a pilgrimage sanctuary outside the original settlement. The statuette was saved from the burning building in 1754 and is placed on a side altar of the present chapel built in 1771. Right? It's also known as the Sailors' Church. Right? And there's model ships that hang from the ceiling in gratitude for Our Lady's help. Right? In 2005, the remains of Marguerite Bourgeois, who I think is a saint, right, were interred beneath the statue. Right? The Immaculate Concezione in Carmagnola in Torino, Piedmont, Italy. So there was a vow made during the plague in 1631, which was renewed in 2000. And actually, they renewed it again on March 25th, 2020, during the COVID-19 affair. They even another time they did it was 1944, when the city was entrusted to the Immaculate to ask for an end to the war. It was they made this vow in 1522 and 1630 because of the plague, and in 1714. Because the animals were dying, and 20 years later, because of drought, right? And then in 1835, because of a cholera epidemic, right? So it's very beautiful, this this renewal of the vow, right? They continue renewing it. So they don't forget that Mary's helped them. And so lastly, we go to Spoleto in Perugia, where they celebrate an icon of the Theotokos, right? It's an icon that was gifted to the city in 1185. It's a wooden, like either, in oak wood or cedar wood, which comes from Constantinople, this image, right? And so we're told that even the devotion of the citizens of Spoleto for this old image is actually great even today. And it's interesting, we're told, the writing in it, which is in Greek letters, it says, "What do you ask, mother? For the health of men." For it's obviously, they're speaking, it's a conversation between Jesus and Mary, right? "What do you ask, O mother? For the health of men," like their salvation. "But they provoke me too much. Be compassionate, my son." But they don't change. "And you save them through your grace," right? So it's a dialogue of intercession between mother and son, which says that the heart of the mother wants all of her children with her in paradise. And so that's what we're celebrating today in the Marian world on June 30th. For today's Marian meditation, taken from the book by Father Ildefonso Villar, we read the concluding part 3 of Meditation 84, The Heart of Our Lady. And here, this third point is entitled, Even Selfishness. Let's hear what Father Ildefonso has to say. Rightly understood, even selfishness is a virtue. Okay. We say that charity begins at home, and certainly, in matters of salvation and sanctification, we are bound to look after our soul more than we do after the others. That is a holy selfishness. Nay, it is a necessary, a compulsory selfishness. This should also embrace the precious devotion to the hearts of Jesus and Mary. In fact, the fruits promised are so excellent. Remember the promises of the Sacred Heart of Jesus to Saint Margaret Mary. "I promise you that my heart will be so enlarged as to share the wealth of this divine love amongst those who honor the Sacred Heart of Jesus and invite others to do likewise." And that wealth is infinite. Certainly the greatest reward is love itself. We cannot be better paid than by the Sacred Heart of Jesus admitting us to his love and allowing us to enter into it. What better could we expect than to love him and to be loved by him? Yet the Lord has enhanced his condescension with such valuable promises that, indeed, out of selfishness we should run to the practice of this devotion. And if you have not so far done so, by whom are you prevented, except by your enemy, the devil? Examine the causes of this apathy and this cowardice of yours in a business of such importance, and reflect that perhaps your failure to have devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus is because you have not gone through the heart of our Heavenly Mother. Consider that the Sacred Heart of Jesus will give you all he has promised through the heart of his mother. Go to Mary then. Take shelter in her heart. Abandon yourself there. Those who are lost in the heart of Mary are bound to find themselves in the most Sacred Heart of Jesus. For today's reading from the Admirable Heart of Mary by St. John Eudes, we start chapter 5. This is the 5th chapter on his commentary on the Magnificat, and here he'll be discussing, "He hath regarded the humility of his handmaid." In order to understand this verse appropriately, we must consider in it the relation to the preceding verse from which it springs. "My soul hath rejoiced in God my Saviour, for he hath regarded the humility of his handmaid. Behold, henceforth all generations shall call me blessed." This verse contains two principal truths, the first of which is expressed in these words, "He hath regarded the humility of his handmaid." What is this humility of which the Blessed Virgin speaks here? The holy doctors are divided in their opinions about it. Some of them say that among all the virtues, humility is the only one which never perceives or becomes aware of itself, for he who believes himself to be humble is really proud. Therefore, when the Blessed Virgin says that God has regarded her humility, she is speaking not of the virtue of humility, but of her lowliness and abjection. Other authorities maintain that humility in a soul consists not in being ignorant of the graces that God has bestowed upon it and the virtues that he has granted, but in returning his gifts and keeping for oneself only nothingness and sin. And that the Holy Spirit, speaking through the mouth of the Blessed Virgin, wishes to teach us that among all the virtues he beheld in her, he loved her humility and approved of it most of all, because the Blessed Virgin had humbled herself beneath all things, and this humility persuaded his divine majesty to elevate her above all creatures by making her the mother of the Creator. O true humility, exclaimed St. Augustine, which gave birth to God for the sake of men and granted life to mortals. The humility of Mary is the heavenly ladder on which God descended to earth. For what is the meaning of respexit if not approvavit? He hath approved, right? He has regarded, he has approved. There are many who appear humble in the eyes of men, but their humility is not beheld by God. For if they were truly humble, they would not find pleasure in the praises of men, and their spirits would not rejoice in the eulogies of this world, but in God.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.